you guys will be back. So with
Yeah.
that being a good lead in, thank you for taking a minute out. I appreciate you taking a minute out
Thank
today for the show.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. This is an honor. I had a chance to. One thing I do a lot is I'll check out people's shows before I even get on them, and I think you have an awesome show,
Thank you.
and I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, no, I love your backstory. And before we get into it, you know, I think one of the more tumultuous events we've all gone through in our lives is this COVID pandemic. So 4 years
Yes.
ago, we were
Yeah.
trying to figure out how we were going to get through it. How did you get through it? How did it change you?
It helped put things into perspective in this regard. I'm certain everybody says that, right? I When I first wrote 101, I'll just tie my book a little bit into it. I was single. I was 28 years old. This is actually the republishing of what I wrote 15 years ago. But to have kids in 2020, my youngest daughter was born.
Wow.
So I have a COVID baby. They're my kids are 4, 6, and 8. Um, to go through that while kids being that young, being a father, a husband, I think that to me put just things into perspective. Even when you start to think about your career
Yeah.
and what you want to do. I mean, I still work at rocket companies. I was working at rocket companies then, but it also changed my career because I focused a lot on um, also some of the social events that took place with George Floyd and things of that nature, where I was able to use a different platform on things that I was doing locally within my community. I'm very big into education and mentorship and ministry. But I remember vividly we were having a business meeting, totally different. We were in the financial services industry, but there was such an uproar of tension just in our communities, and there were assumptions being made on how to handle these situations. And I remember vividly standing up in the meeting and saying, "We're not doing that. We need to do this." And as a native Detroiter and as a person of color, uh, I'm not going to stand aside and not allow for people who have helped me be the person I am to not have a voice. I remember vividly one time, I think George Floyd was, a couple of years now, and I remember sitting on my deck and I honestly thought about quitting my job. Not because anything bad was happening there, not because I didn't have a good working environment with people who were there, but with COVID, with a newborn, it was now my third at the time. I honestly started asking myself, am I utilizing the gifts and talents I've been given correctly?
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I honestly had to start asking myself that question, and it stems still to this book that I wrote, the first one that I wrote, Real World 101, is because that's what it was all about. Like I stepped away from I just graduated from grad school. I stepped away from industry. At the time I was a logistics manager for Procter and Gamble, but I've always had this fire and desire to for servant leadership. And even when I think about this book and how I constructed it, I didn't go into it thinking like writing a book wasn't on my mind. It was never about that. It never was. It was about me mentoring to young adults that I was invited to speak in front of, as a someone who's in their career, someone who grew up in an inner city and had a chance to just experience a lot and take advantage of the wisdom that was given to me from all different walks of life, races, creeds, you name it. And it was the response from the audience, from those young adults, from the students who were just so elated that we were making it okay to ask the question why.
Yeah.
And it was from that feedback that allowed where they said to me, Alcott, Mr. Germany, is there something else that can we continue this conversation? And I'm like, yeah, why
Yeah.
not? And
Yeah.
that is really what led me to go to grad school for education because my undergrad is actually in chemical engineering. My so I went to grad school for education, and I remember resigning from the company I worked for at the time, and I moved in with my cousin. I was living in her attic, and it was just a comforter, a pillow, and a mattress, and my laptop, and just writing what was on my heart. And it was all about the questions that we sometimes are afraid to ask, despite the fact that we ask them every day to ourselves.
Yeah,
Like, like, why am I doing this? Why am I in this class? Why am I doing this? I ask the same questions, and I feel like those are the kind of questions that allow you to make history and that
yeah,
allow you to have purpose and allow you to have a path. And so, really, to me, that's how all of this kind of manifested. Like this sense of purpose, really is what spawned, the Alcott who was 28 years old at that time, and the one who's 44 now. And really, to me, that's my long-winded, way of responding to, your question. But it just put things into perspective, and it's
sure.
not about like letting life pass you by, or I love watching movies, and there's one I think it was You Mean the Priest, like waiting on the mothership. Like
Yeah,
I'm not,
yeah,
but more about, am I using the fullest, potential in the gifts and talent that I've been given
yeah,
for the ways that make the most sense to me. And so that's why I take full advantage of these conversations. Like I'm enjoying this already, but I was so excited to come here. My power is out. We had a storm come through. That's why I'm in my
uh-oh,
kitchen,
uh-oh,
but the generator's running and I'm okay.
okay,
And so I just love having these conversations, because the more people hear them, the more they think to themselves, like, wow, so the questions I do have, they are okay.
absolutely.
And that's really when you start to make something special.
I love that answer. I love the groundwork, and I think it was awakening for a lot of us. I feel like sometimes we've gone through a rapture, and all of us
Yeah,
that are left behind are just kind of, we just have a different grit.
yeah,
We're
yeah.
here. Let's do it. Let's get into it.
Yeah, and we
Yeah,
have an appreciation for it. I mean, I was talking about the Lions, and they're fan favorites around the country. But
yeah,
I took my family to the draft that Saturday, not the first couple of days, but that Saturday, and it was to just see the city awaken
yeah,
in a way that I've always seen as someone who's grown up in the community. But to be on a stage like that, in an area that I grew up in. Like
yeah,
that, no, I was physically downtown when the Hudson building was imploded. Now to see it being rebuilt from the ground up, you probably saw in Peacock, the train station.
yeah,
Like I remember when that was totally dilapidated. I'd been in that physical building when that was the case, and to see now it's hosting an Eminem concert with local artists and national artists, and even our own Diana Ross opening up. And I grew up on the Motown sound. My dad was a pastor before he passed away in 2019. He was a presiding elder, but you know what? Before then, he was a martial arts instructor and a Panther who supported the community.
yeah,
And so when we talk about standing on the shoulders of giants, to me, this is the appreciation that you have for the stories that lead up to the moments.
yeah,
Is to me, that's what you live for, and that's
yeah,
what you want to pass down to your kids, and that's the work that I see you do in your show,
yeah.
and the work that I hope I'm able to continue to do, is something that means a lot to me.
So speaking of work, let's get into what you do exactly. I'm gonna put you in front of a bunch of grade school
Yeah,
kids. All right.
yeah.
It's career day. One of the kids says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" What's your
And
answer?
I say, yeah, you know what? I do a whole lot. So I have a passion as an author and a public speaker. To pay the bills until I'm able to do that fully. I actually do consultation for rocket companies. I was a former vice president of rocket companies, not too long ago. But this has allowed me to have a lot more flexibility. But I also have additional passion. I've written a screenplay for an animated series that I'm hoping to push, and so
Right on.
I'm with the way that I sort of start the conversation is walking them through like how did all that happen? Like like I went to undergrad to be a chemical engineer because I didn't want to be restricted to one particular discipline. And I didn't even know what an engineer was actually as a senior in high school. I actually had to read up on it. And I was like, yeah, I'm pretty good at tutoring math and science. Um, yeah, and I don't want to do just, you know, physics. I want to be able to kind of go wherever I want to go with this thing and be an engineer, but speaking through a student's lens and a teacher's lens versus the sort of the stereotypical engineering approach of let me share y'all all this knowledge that I have and you need to just do it the way I'm thinking.
Yeah.
And so yeah, at career day, I really start off by saying, hey, you know what? I do consultation for a very large financial company, and that's a staple in not only in Detroit but in the country. But I also have an undergrad in chemical engineering and a master's in education. Oh yeah, and I have this book out. And typically, 10 out of 10 times, they're like, "How does that even make sense?" And I said, "Let me show you."
Yeah.
And in that, I got to share this story. I've told it a couple of times, but I think it's so important to share and it's I was at a career fair a couple of years ago. This was probably my before I wrote my first publication. I was at a career fair and I was a logistics manager at the time. And I had a student around their friends telling me, you know what, I just want to play basketball. And I said, okay, let's what I'm not going to do is shoot down your dream. But let's unpack that. And I said, so what position would you play? And he said, you know what, I'll be this point. I want to be a point guard. I said, yeah. I said, your size, presents that as well. I said, well, what's the role you think a point guard plays on the floor? I said, don't you have to understand the offense, you have to understand the defense. You need to know where all the players are on the court. You need to know when to attack, when to hold back, make plays for people, make people better, as they say today. I said, and you have to be the coach on the floor. And they're like, yeah. I said, now help me understand how that's any different than running a business where you have to understand the demand of the market. You have to understand the service you need to provide. You need to understand how to provide in a quality way. You need to understand how to build a team that will actually deliver that service well. And you have to be able to make adjustments based on the feedback you're getting. Not even 30 seconds later, Joe. Now, that's what makes I always love to share this story. Not even 30 seconds, he says to me, I always wanted to run my own garage too. And just like that, just like that. So I'm
Yep.
like, I'm not going to go on the attack and tell you what you can't be, but let's just expand our thinking
Yep.
on what you can be. I
Yep.
never once said anything about you running a garage or doing any, but just in that conversation alone, supporting your thoughts, supporting your dreams, but thinking through how this can be applied in other ways. You told me what you can do with that,
Yeah.
and I think that to me is a lost just a lost message. Right now we are, and I think some of this even came out from COVID. Like we're in survival mode, and
Yeah.
we're very conscious of trying to get to the next thing so that we can stay surviving. But one of the questions that I even ask in my book is, what does success even look like to an educated mind? Like you got to be able to answer that question,
Sure.
and a part of that answer can be you don't know.
Yeah.
Like you don't know is also an acceptable answer.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's one of the first things they tell you in what hunter safety. Like the first thing you need to do is acknowledge when you're lost.
Yeah.
If you're
Yeah.
lost in the woods, like those are the kind of things that I think we shy away from when we say, hey, with new information, I'm making this decision, or with what's going on, I can't totally grasp, where to go next. Like once we start to admit that more, and I do think since COVID, we've gotten more and more apprehensive of that. It's like you have to be certain and then you have to stick to it. Like
Yeah.
that kind of goes against the principles of learning.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Absolutely.
you
So,
know,
who's been a role model or a hero for you in your life? You're
oh,
obviously highly accomplished. But who was that for you?
I've been blessed, Joe. I'm I've been blessed. My dad passed away in 2019, but I was one of those kids who had a dad as a hero. Um, my parents were my heroes, are my heroes. My mom's still alive, thankfully. I always say all the time that my mom taught me how to use my heart and my dad taught me how to use my head. Um, they gave me a sense of understanding how to serve and how to do the most with what you've been given. And what that's allowed me to do, like I could have given you the general answer of like, oh, I've learned from everybody. And I have. I'm learning from you. I'm learning from you about how open-minded people are, even in the even in the city of Kansas City. And what they have allowed me to become and allowed me to understand both mentally and spiritually is that the world is bigger than the place you grow up in. And so it allowed me, their teaching allowed me to learn from other people. Like, and one of the things that I'm thankful for is I am the product of some great teachers, but it was my parents who helped me understand the importance of learning from them
Yeah,
and respecting knowledge and respecting position. Doesn't mean that if you ask me, some folks who've worked with me, I'll challenge the best of them. you, I'll walk in the room with the president of the United States and ask a challenging question. But I think before you get to that place, you have to respect the journeys that people have. You have to understand that just because you disagree doesn't make the other person wrong. You have to understand that you can both be right about something. And I get that. I really do believe that that started with my two greatest heroes, which are my parents. And I also learned that when I say I'm blessed and thankful, I know everybody you know, don't get that same luxury. They
yeah,
don't have, and I didn't come from means. When I think back, I was like, wow, we really didn't have a whole lot. I didn't even know we didn't
yeah,
because of what was ingrained in us and what was shared with us. And I would I think I would have to say, it started with my parents, and again, it's a blessing because I know a lot of people don't get that,
yeah,
and they even taught me that, like, how do you understand and respect and feed into those who weren't able to have a two-parent household or didn't have a stay-at-home mom, and I'm like, my mom wanted to stay at home because that was her passion. That doesn't mean that you know women in the workforce, there's anything wrong with that either.
yeah,
But also, it doesn't mean that, I feel like my mom's one of the strongest women I've ever met. And that doesn't mean if you decide to stay at home that you're letting the world pass you by. Like you have to also just be able to understand what makes you happy. And when I think about, me and my three siblings, we have a bond. We're not at each other's throats. There wasn't when my dad passed away. It was kind of funny when I think about it in this regard. There was no drama of any kind that you would see, when it comes to, the kind of emotions and the kind of tension that comes with loss.
yeah,
We were as connected and as in sync during a very emotional time. My father passed away from cancer in a very, very just, it was traumatic because of how swift it was.
yeah,
And when I think about people who have since gone in my life and witnessed other families. I'm not saying every family's like this. Obviously, we've had to learn from someone, but I used to see just how that emotion would tear a family apart and
yeah,
leave these scars. And if it's one thing I remember about, the experience in 2019, this was right before they shut things down with COVID too. So I'm glad we were actually able to, not be disturbed by that. Was just how in sync I was with my three other siblings
yeah,
and what we did for our mom. And so, again, that's another long-winded way. I just want to share some examples of the impact that my parents had on me. I can't thank them enough. I mean,
yeah,
I get emotional thinking about it sometimes.
yeah, for sure. Of all of these things that you've done and evolved into in your life, what are you the proudest of?
Mm, that's a great one. I know it's cliche, um, but I would have to say my kids, my immediate family. We weren't the Huxtables growing up when I was a kid, so every family has its opportunities, right? despite the blessings I just spoke on. And I would say, with what I learned growing up, I was confident in what I could do with my career. I was confident in things that I could do independently. I was scared to be a dad. This is probably like late breaking news. I don't even know if I've told my wife this, but I was, I was scared to be a dad and nervous to be a husband. And so to see that we're still on this journey together, we'll be sharing our 10-year wedding anniversary in August. My kids are 4, 6, and 8, and in their right minds, at least so far. And they love their dad and they love their mom. That's what I'm most proud of, and that's what inspires me to be on these kinds of shows. Like,
Yeah.
I know for me, it's always about the next thing. It's okay. How do I put the best part of myself on display for them? Because my dad was my role model. There's so much. We don't have time. Maybe over coffee or whatever, that I can explain to you how my parents are woven into the fabric. Because I was the first in my family to graduate from uh, actually, my sister was the first. I was the second. I'm sorry, first male to graduate from an undergrad degree, and those were seeds planted by them.
Yeah.
And so when I think about the seeds I'm planting, that to me is to me my greatest achievement. If when I have to answer for what I've done, in my life, I believe being a husband, a father is going to be at the top of that list, and for those reasons. And it's still a thing you have to just. I'm nervous about because you just want to do the best you can in
Yeah.
both those spaces, and it's a long journey. But coming off Father's Day, I'm really thankful for the recognition that not only my kids have given me, my wife has, and to even get text messages from people around the country who I don't see as much anymore. Those things matter.
Yeah.
They matter.
Yeah, they certainly do. So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you. Family,
Mhm.
friends, clients, colleagues, but you run the show. What's your
Yeah.
perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I My perception of myself. That's wow. You're a great question. You get some
Thanks.
great ones, Joe. I I'm gonna take this. I'm gonna take a spin to it.
Yeah.
I feel like I am here to speak on behalf of the folks who helped build me into who I am. I think that the things that I've learned, growing up, I think that most of them, not think, I know most of them did not have platforms. They weren't on podcast shows. And so I feel like in a lot of ways I'm a myth buster. I think in ways I'm a teacher. Um, but I never want to ever lose sight of being a student. And so I want to represent not just my city and my family, but my generation because, man, I know you've seen it because you're in the industry. You look at your phone, you'll see 10, even in sports, you'll see 10 critiques before you get to somebody being praised. Or, we have to prove ourselves to people who don't know exactly what that person is going through. They may be able to relate in one way, shape, or form. And no one's taking away people's credentials as journalists and things of that nature. That's the job. That's the gig. That's just the world that we're in. And I feel like it's on me and people who I'm around and people who have led me and people who I lead to just be that testament to what it means to be committed to just being positive and
Yeah.
moving forward and not judging and learning from our faults and learning from our mistakes. And that's easier said than done, but I feel like I have a responsibility to show how that's done
Yeah.
in my own way, and to just make certain I'm doing it in a very purposeful way and not just a way to where I'm gaining wealth. Of course, no, I'm not going to be naive. Everybody likes money
Yeah.
in some way, shape, or form. but I feel like that's how I look at myself. I really do look at myself as a servant leader that is just trying to be have a very focused approach on taking the things I have learned. I've experienced a lot of things, Joe, at a very young age, and I used to ask myself, like, why am I learning this when a lot of my peers have not?
Yeah.
And I have turned that into so that I can help others who are trying to learn the same thing. And I really do look at it that way. I look at myself as this agent of positivity, this
Yep.
agent of purpose, this I speak a lot on 101 because it spoke about that time in my life and in the lives with others about when you're trying to learn things that you're doing in your scholastic life and how that ties into real life. I have another project that I'm working on that now speaks to leadership and the intangibles of that. Because as we continue to grow, whether we decide to be a leader by title, we are still leaders as people. Someone is looking to you to provide the story of how the world works. And so I just think it's so important to represent your story in the right way. And you're going to make mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes. I may even make some really, really bad ones. But I think even how you recover from those moments is a testament to, what this should really be about instead of just judging. And I do feel like I am an agent of that. I do feel like that is my purpose and that's how I see myself. And I challenge myself every day on, am I doing that thing in whatever capacity I'm doing it in?
Well, it exudes from you. So if anyone out there would like to get your book, anybody wants to
Yes.
reach out, learn more about what you're doing, all the great work, how do they do that?
Oh, thank you so much. And I know I keep saying that after every question, but I'm that excited to be on this show. So you can find Real World 101 on all of the major bookstores. You can go to Amazon and search my name or Alcott Germany II. Trust me, I'm the only one there. Barnes and Noble, Walmart, and Target. I'm excited to say that eventually they will also be in stores in Target, Walmart, brick and mortars. But Powell's, Books a Millions, City of Books, the publisher, they're all there. You can find me directly on LinkedIn at Alcott Germany II. I have an Instagram as well, Alcott Germany II, and there's even a website. Again, my name is that unique, AlcottGermany2nd.com. So that's ALCOTT, Germany spelled just like the country, II. And so you could please message me. I would love to get your feedback. I just came back from LA at the Festival of Books, and I even had students from USC reach out to me while at that fair, and we just talked about just things that they've learned from Real World 101 and how what that means for them. So I would love to just, have a dialogue with anyone who's willing to do that or show up where anyone needs me. I'm sorry. So, yep, LinkedIn, AlcottGermany2nd.com, there's a website, as well as Instagram and all of your major book retailers. You can find it there anytime.
I
And
love it.
also, I just got to put this plug out there as well.
Yes,
I
sir.
have an audio book is coming. So
Cool.
we do have an audio book and we have multiple languages coming out. So this will be available in English, Spanish, Mandarin, Japanese, Italian, Portuguese, German, and Arabic. So
Right
that's
on.
coming down the pipe.
Man, it's so good to meet you, Alcott. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your vision. And we should catch back up here. Let's catch
Please.
back up after the season starts. We'll get into it a little
Love
bit.
it.
We'll dig further.
I love it. I love it. Joe, it's such a pleasure. It's an honor and a privilege to be on your show. And I just want to thank you for all that you do.
Yeah, same to me. Yeah, I feel the same way. Thank you. I appreciate it. Have a wonderful weekend.